we have been given such a unique opportunity right now with COVID-19, with us being forced to stay home, to do less distraction, less entertainment options, to really take a look at our life and say what's serving me and what's not serving me. So grateful for today's guest, Frankie Leigh, who really went into the details of nutrition. We talked about sleep. We talked about what we're eating, what we're drinking. We talked about caffeine. There's so many things that impact your health. This episode is going to give you answers to these questions of maybe why am I not feeling as good as I should? How do I better fortify myself against viruses and other things that are going around in the world? How do I control my weight and not be on this yo-yo? All of these things are so important. And again, it's such an opportunity right now to really for us to evaluate. And Frankie is going to be such a resource for you in this episode and some of the resources that she offers. I can't wait for you to listen to this episode. It really goes along with my mission of helping you to grow your business without sacrificing everything else. Enjoy. Welcome back to the Think Bigger Real Estate Show. I'm your host, Justin Stoddart. Very excited today to bring you a solution that I think is on everybody's mind. How do I stay healthy when my work environment's totally changed? We have our offices have never been closer to our pantries. We're not allowed to get out and do some of the things that we once did. We aren't allowed to go to the gym. We aren't allowed to do some things. And so our nutrition is more important than ever before. Those of us that are highly ambitious real estate professionals realize how important our health is in this whole equation. And so today I have with me an expert when it comes to nutrition and health. Her name is Frankie Leigh. She is the owner of Radiate Wellness. And it was not too long ago, at the age of 27, that she had 2 diagnoses to cancer. And she had to realize at that point, how do I solve this? And she solved it and really found her passion to help people improve their nutrition. Before I fully introduce her, let me just remind you that the podcast, you can get the full episode of the podcast, both on your favorite podcast app and or YouTube. If you go there, be sure to subscribe and receive notifications because today's episode is going to be amazing. I'm so excited to have you here, Frankie. Thank you for coming on to the Think Bigger Real Estate Show.
Thank you, Justin, for having me.
Yes. Talk to us a little bit about kind of your journey, right? You haven't always been a nutritionist. You really found a passion for that because it was really a means for you to save your own life. Is that true? Am I over-exaggerating that, or is that true?
No, I think it was a huge turning point for me, to be young, to be 27, to have these, new diagnosis kind of being thrown at me and wondering, the big question for me was, why is my body not working with me and why is it working against me? And so for me, finding out the world of functional nutrition was really my path to uncovering some answers to questions that nobody else was really able to find. I found myself going to several different specialists and trying to, uncover what is the root cause? Why is my body not working with me at such a young age? I should be thriving and healthy. And so getting those answers were just totally key and clutch for me to turn my health around. And it just spurred such an interest in functional nutrition moving forward.
How far off were you on your nutrition? Were you always like a pretty healthy person? Or just some minor tweaks? Or did you have to kind of totally readjust things?
Great question. So for me, I ended up doing some further testing through functional nutrition on food intolerance. And so food intolerance is really how your immune system is responding to foods in your diet. So I would say I had a fairly clean diet. In your 20s, you're in college, you're doing all the things. But in general, I was in a time in my life where I was really interested in, small scale farming and organic farming. And so I had really, tried to do a lot of things to bring more veggies into the kitchen and bring more health into my home already. But the key to food intolerance testing is it really looks at this, bank of about 100 foods to say, even if it's something that we consider really healthy, like broccoli or almonds or eggs, one of those things could be something that's triggering your immune system to kind of malfunction. And that was one of the big triggers for me.
How interesting, Frankie, that, you think that if you eat healthy foods that good things in, good things out, you're going to have this that's a good equation. But what you're saying is that you can actually be eating a certain good food that is actually triggering your body to fight against itself, right? And create things like cancer, for example. That's really enlightening, somewhat scary a little bit, right? Because you can think I'm eating everything healthy. I don't have anything to worry about. what you're saying is that's not necessarily the case.
Right. And I think so often, whether it's a cancer diagnosis or just like a stack of symptoms, right, that are kind of building over time. And again, you're finding yourself going to several specialists to try to, kind of put some patchwork on the holes in the ship. Really what you're able to do with functional nutrition is say, okay, well, what is the data below the surface? What are the things that are causing, these symptoms to rise to the top? And sometimes it is just one or two or maybe three root things that need to be kind of cleared out, or get the waters cleared to be able to see, like, let your body do what it's naturally supposed to do. And that's really what I believe is, like, our bodies naturally want to be healthy and want to be in a state of balance or a state of homeostasis, but we get cluttered up by a lot of things that may be causing some issues along the way.
So good. We have, let's talk a little bit about kind of beyond that, if you're okay, kind of pivoting to one of the concerns that all of us have right now is, you hear a lot of people. In fact, I joked when I was promoting our episode today, as I had a neighbor and they walk like crazy. They're superstar walkers. I'm like, you guys have the neighborhood gold medal. Every time they walk by, I like cheer them on. I'm like, you guys are walking. And she's like, I have to do something to combat the amount of food that I'm eating. And she said that she and her sister were actually joking that I'm going to wear my mask, right, that we all have for COVID-19 inside the house so that I'll keep myself from eating so much. And I think, maybe some of us have felt that way, that again, the pantry is closer than it's ever been. Hopefully with your help, some of the stuff in the pantry is going to be better, right? Is going to actually help us be putting better things in, but still there's this quantity issue that we're dealing with. Can you give us some insight on how maybe we can combat that to where we're not constantly grazing and constantly overindulging ourselves?
Absolutely. So I think now more than ever, we really need to just be aware of what our craving cycles are. Like, what are we craving? When are we craving it in the day? And then try to get ahead of that. So two ways that I think are really, really important to get ahead of what I call kind of the hunger or the craving, or that kind of constant grazing that many of us are doing, living and working in our homes, is to make sure that we're getting adequate sleep. Now, I know it seems a little disconnected, but our ability to heal and repair and really get good solid sleep between the hours of 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., these are like the magic hours where our body, does a lot with hormone balancing. We do a lot of recovery during that time. A lot of our cortisol is able to kind of down regulate, which we all need. That good sleep actually really helps us to have less cravings during the day. And it's an amazing tool that we have right at our fingertips. But so many of us, push past that 10 o'clock mark. We're up on our screens. We're kind of like, our minds are still racing through, worry or anxiety about what's going on. But just giving yourself the chance to have a good cradle at night, to be able to go to bed, at a reasonable hour, get some good sleep, that can really help cravings during the day.
Boy, that's interesting, isn't it? That from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. I actually had a basketball coach in high school who was a wonderful man, had a big impact upon me. At one point, I actually earned the National Head High School Basketball Coach Award for the country. Anyway, pretty neat man. And he would tell us, even as young teens, he said, for every hour of sleep that you get before midnight, it's the equivalent of 2 hours of rest for your body. And I was always like, what? Right. And as a teenager, you didn't want to hear that.
He was a smart man. That's exactly right. Because it's really letting your body be more in congruence with your circadian rhythm. And it's when we push out of the circadian rhythm that we're just not able to get into those deeper layers of sleep.
So does the circadian rhythm revolve around, I apologize for my ignorance on this matter, but maybe some of my audience feels the same way. The circadian rhythm, does it somewhat correlate with kind of like with sun up, sun down? Like your body just knows that because it's dark, it's time to start settling down?
Exactly. So it's based around light and temperature. So as it gets darker and cooler, that's really the signals to the body to start down regulating. But in our modern world, we keep lights on, some of us watch TV until very late, those types of things. And that can really start to disturb the circadian rhythm.
So if you had advice for people on how to do that, some people are like 10 p.m. Are you kidding me, Frankie? 10 p.m. Like, what advice would you give to them? Because again, it's starting to get lighter and lighter until last night it was 7:45. My wife said, it's 7:45. I can't believe how late it is already. And it was like light as day almost, right? So,
Mhm.
what advice have you found to actually get yourself in bed by 10 p.m.? It sounds like screens have something to do with that, right? Even starting to kind of dim the lights a little bit and let your body kind of start to relax
Mhm.
before 10.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, if you can find, a little bit of a backup in your whole schedule. So, for some of us, that means like, stopping work a half an hour early, trying to, get dinner maybe a half an hour earlier. Still being able to like do your entertainment or watch your shows or whatever you want to do, between that like 7 and 9 o'clock hour. But then, like, in that 9 o'clock time, trying your best at that point to try to start to send your body into the cradle, I call it. Like, how do we create the cradle for ourselves as adults to be able to get the most out of our sleep? And that, that screen time has a lot to do with it, but just, really giving ourselves that transition time, whether it's reading a book or going ahead and getting in bed, allowing ourselves to experience relaxation. And I think that a lot of times we're looking for something from the outside to relax us, right? And so giving yourselves that opportunity to learn that skill for yourself, and to really, be able to wake up. And it doesn't mean that you have to wake up at 4 o'clock. Don't get me wrong. It's like you can wake up, 6, 7 o'clock. If that works for you, you get a good, 8, 9 hours of sleep. It's a huge, huge boon for your body.
We as a society have often kind of taken this kind of badge of honor for like, I didn't sleep very much. I even caught myself doing that. I went through a phase this past year while I was writing a book and I was up at 4 and, there's some pride around that. Like I'm working hard, I'm hustling, right? I've almost seen kind of this counterculture movement to where like even kind of some of the big tech companies, like people like brag about how much sleep they got, right? And it's interesting to kind of see kind of the science come out about how important sleep is. So this has been really, really
Mm-hmm.
fascinating. I don't know if you have anything else to kind of share about that with regards to how long people should be sleeping. And I'm sure it's different for each person. Like I've always been somebody kind of who needs less sleep, right,
Mm-hmm.
than others. But I'd love to hear kind of your take on how much really we should be sleeping.
I think that for many people, it's that the magic is between that 7 and 9 hour mark. I think that over time, multiple days, multiple weeks of getting 5 or 6 hours, we tend to really drive ourselves towards more chronic fatigue issues, just because we aren't giving ourselves the chance to replenish and to kind of fill the well again. And so I would say that you're absolutely right that it is a badge of honor for many people to think like, oh, look how much I'm getting done, and I think that it's a time right now where we can maybe give ourselves the option to do a little less, to recalibrate and to look at some of these patterns and some of these habits, and maybe be able to go back out into the workforce or back out into the new normal, with a different recharge.
Yeah. The it is interesting how right now we're really being invited, really, call it the universe, call it God, call it, whatever, to really take a look at like what does our life look like, and is it really serving us? Is today's Earth Day, is it serving the planet? Is it serving us? Is it serving our family? I found a number of things that I've been doing that I feel like haven't been really serving me and those around me in the best way, and it's really been a great kind of audit, like forced audit, to say, now why have I done that, right? And why have I only been sleeping 5 to 6 hours? And why have I been kind of snacking all the time? And like these things, it's I think the first step is self-awareness, right? And I think the education you're bringing to us is to recognize and say, hey, that might not be in your best interest. Like, and sometimes we think, well, okay, if I can actually sleep less, then I'll have more time to work. But we live in a knowledge economy where our brain is the most important muscle. It always is the most important muscle, right? But it's the most important muscle for our work. And yet we're almost starving it with what it needs most, which is sleep and rest and kind of decompress time, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, there's two really interesting hormones that we create in our body, and they're called ghrelin and leptin. And leptin is the hormone that kind of tells us it's time to stop eating. And ghrelin is the hormone that tells us it's time to start eating. It's like kind of the hunger hormone. I remember it like, it sounds like gremlin to me. So it's like, oh, like it's time to eat, that little gremlin inside that's talking to you saying, give me something. So ghrelin and leptin are things that really get reset in our sleep. And so we may find in times of depletion where we're maybe like pushing that 5 or 6 hour night of sleep, that we're really not, we're waking up kind of feeling like in that state of deficiency, and we're going to be craving more often. So it kind of leads me to my second point, which I think is a really important thing for us to focus on, right now is to balance our blood sugar starting out first thing in the day. And what I mean by balancing our blood sugar is making sure that that first meal of the day comes within an hour of waking up, and that it's has all of our macros in it. So it has our protein, it has our little bit of our healthy fats in it, and it also has our carb load in it, mostly coming from vegetable intake. So you want to think about that first meal of the day. You know, we always have heard it, and so many of us are like, yeah, that's just not me. I just go right to work, or I have my cup of coffee, you know, but right now it's so important for us to get that good sustenance first thing in the day, and to really monitor and think about what we're doing for our meals, for lunch and for dinner. Those things are huge in being able to help us from just that constant grazing or that constant craving throughout the day.
Hmm. So an ideal healthy day would look something like you go to bed at 10, get up 7 to 9 hours after that, right? Now, with my basketball coach's input that you validated, can I count 2 hours of sleep before 10? So I'm going to bed at 10. Does that count as 4? And if I get up at 4, that's actually 8 hours.
Nope, doesn't quite work like that. It's
All right,
more
okay.
of just like it's kind of an abstract addition. It's not an actual addition.
Okay. Okay. So get up 7 to 9 hours after that. Get up and eat something that has, like you said, the macros. And for those that don't understand that, give us a quick snapshot. I know that's a super important component of nutrition. I hear people talking about it. I don't know that I fully understand it, but there's what? There's proteins, there's healthy fats, and then there's a third one, right? If I remember correctly.
Carbohydrates,
Carbohydrates.
right?
Okay.
Yep. And I usually say, like, think about getting your carbohydrates from vegetable intake, because those are carbohydrates, right? We need those carbs. They turn to glucose, they fuel the body. We need them. But what we don't need is a lot of processed carbohydrates. So waking up and eating a breakfast, like, I'll use kind of a common example, like toast with jam on it, right? In the morning, first thing, like, that's going to be a pretty high processed carbohydrate load. You're not going to have a lot of fat or protein in that. That's going to ground it. That's going to help it be a slow burn. It's going to kind of spike blood sugar right away out of the gate. And then you'll be on that peaks and valleys where the blood sugar drops. And then you'll be craving again to try to get that blood sugar back up into the good zone, right? So that's the importance of the macros and eating them in a balanced way. Is the protein and the fat really helps to keep the carbohydrates grounded, so you have a slow burn of energy.
Because otherwise we're headed back to the pantry, right? And I think that's probably what you've just described there is either A, our body is tired because we haven't given it enough sleep. And so we're finding fuel, since we didn't get it through sleep, we're finding it through, and we go for kind of that thing that gives us the quickest return, right? Which is carbs, like probably poor carbs, which quickly turns to fat, as we all know. And then secondly, we haven't, when we did take in food, again, we did food or nutrition that burned really quickly, right? It didn't stick with us, which again causes us to go back for more sooner than we should, which causes us to overeat. And interesting. What else would you add to that I just missed? Again, in my kind of synopsis, in my simple brain, I've tried to like really kind of lay out what the ideal day is for productivity, for happiness. Is there anything that I missed there? I'm sure there's a lot, but like if you were to look at a more comprehensive view, but in that kind of simplistic view, is there anything else that would be critical for somebody to really live a healthy life amidst these new circumstances?
Well, I would say that really monitor your caffeine intake. And that's another one where we tend to kind of grab for that thing that's going to give us the quickest satisfaction, right? The quickest, give me some energy right now because that's what I need. And to really rethink that and say, okay, I want to get my energy from food instead of from what is considered kind of like false energy in the world of caffeine. So, and to realize that when you drink that first cup of coffee in the morning, the half-life of caffeine, how it burns in the system, is actually still just a smidge of it is still there the next morning when you drink coffee again. So if you're a person who tends to drink coffee throughout the day or drink, soda or things that are kind of keeping you on this like upper or kind of like charge with caffeine throughout the day, you're going to be one kind of appetite suppressed for small windows, but then you're going to crave out, right? To kind of bring yourself back up when you feel the crash. So I think that there's a big correlation that gets missed between our caffeine intake. And that's part of that like badge of honor, do more, look how sharp I am, look how fast my brain works, right? More caffeine, more coffee. but it really can send us on that same roller coaster where we end up kind of craving out when it's not there.
I read the funniest tweet early this morning. Probably, again, not my best habit of getting up and looking at Twitter, but one of the guys I follow, his daughter said, "Hey, Dad, why do you drink caffeine some days?" He said, "Oh, sweetheart, it's so that I can make the same mistakes, but faster and with more enthusiasm." So I love that. I've thankfully I'm not a big caffeine drinker myself, but I do see close friends of mine, like they literally can't start their day without it, right? No judgment. But I feel like that there's got to be that's taking the place of some nutrition, right? That's taking the place of something that their body's actually craving, actually needing to actually wake them up naturally, right? And maybe it's a sleep deficit, maybe it's a nutrition deficit, but maybe that's a good indicator for those that are like having to go back to the coffee pot over and over again, right? Is that maybe there's something else amiss here, whether it be my sleep, whether it be what I'm intaking into my body that's causing me to have to do that. Because if, for a guy that doesn't drink coffee, like I feel like I'm probably more awake and alert in the mornings oftentimes than other people. Again, no judgment. There's like 100,000 things that I don't do as well. But that's one thing that I'm like, I don't know that it's necessary, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you can actually be awake and alert without having caffeine the minute you wake up, right? I'm kind of living proof to that. Of course, because I haven't drank it, that it's, my body has never had that kind of dependence. And so it's probably not a fair representation of, for those that have. But I do think that there, like what you're talking about here, where there's this constant dependence upon it, even midday, later in the day, that maybe there's some nutrition things that could take the place of that would give a more natural kind of boost and
Mm-hmm.
give your body a kind of an overall healthier intake habit anyway, right?
Yeah, so I always go back to like, what's the science behind like where we actually draw energy from? Like, what's the true energy that we need to fuel the body? And we have two sources of that. We have glucose, right, which is the one that everybody kind of remembers from science class in high school, like the sends all the cycles moving in the body. And that comes from our carbohydrates, our vegetable intake. But we also get energy from ketones, which are from our fats in the diet. And a lot of us have heard about, a ketogenic diet or, a keto diet being kind of a newer, it doesn't even feel new anymore. I feel like it's been around now for years, but we have a little bit more awareness about these higher fat diets that are out there. And I don't think that it's for everyone, but I think that we can learn something from the fact that, okay, if we really distill it down to what do we need to get our energy from, we can push fat higher in the diet and use that to get more of our energy. And it's a lot more slow burning. It's a lot more satiating. It's a lot more satisfying than the up and down swing of something like caffeine or carbs. So, one of the hacks that I use is, I don't drink caffeine in the morning. I'm just drinking, maybe like an herbal tea or a Tulsi tea. I actually drink a tea that Tulsi is something that kind of calms the nervous system down. So it's kind of counterintuitive to what most people think of like what the morning cup of joe should do to you. But I take that and I also use coconut milk, like a high fat coconut milk. And I actually add MCT oil to it, and I froth it and steam it and make it like a sexy drink that you would get at the coffee shop. Pour it in there, and it's actually, I'm still drinking a morning drink, but I'm getting the energy from the fat. Does that make sense? Does that help?
It does. Yeah, it does. It's probably a great substitute, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's actually, fat is really what feeds our brain. The kind of like the matter of our brain is actually coated in fat cells. It's actually fed by fat. And so when we, in the 90s, we took fat out of the diet, we actually started to kind of like, our energy levels went down, our cravings for carbs went up. When everything was fat free, we got a lot more chronic illness, a lot more chronic disease because fat went away. And so now we're finding this like resurgence of fat coming back. And I really think that there's this cognitive element to it that's been missing to fuel the brain, to kind of help us feel, if it helps us feel alert, it helps us feel sharp, it helps us with word retrieval, all of those things that we think of getting from caffeine.
Wow. And that's, again, working in a knowledge economy where the value that we bring to the marketplace is the solutions that we can bring to people, right? The things that we can think and design and execute on and inform other people and lead other people and teach other people. how critical is that, right? What you just shared with us is really a goldmine of both the sleep component as well as the nutrition food component of having, both of those working in our favor to help us really have an advantage in this knowledge economy. It's fantastic. Talk to us a little bit about water. I feel like water is one of those things that we all know we should do, but it's not quite as fun to drink as some of the other options out there. How have you kind of coached people and helped people to really make water maybe more of a priority?
Yeah, so I think, kind of like that building into the front part of the first part of the day. I think if you can work it into your routine to wake up and drink not a cold, but a warm glass of water, because warmth really helps our digestive system wake up. This is something that I see people making around water and hydration is they actually will do a lot of iced water, ice drinks, cold drinks, out of our refrigerators, cold things. And that really actually constricts the digestive system and causes it to have a harder time digesting. So think warm first thing in the morning, kind of an important part of this. But, drink a quart jar of water or, a couple cups of water first thing in the morning, just to kind of get your ounces up in the day. And then, a good goal to have is to have half of your body weight in ounces. So if you weigh 150 pounds, you should be drinking 75 ounces of water in a day.
And I love that advice of like, get it out of the way early, right? I mean, just a pure glass of water tastes great on a hot day. But then add in that it's got to be like warm water. I'm like, in fact, it reminds me, my wife and I lived in Houston, Texas for 6 months. That's all we lasted. And I remember going to the faucet and I would turn on cold water and warm water would come out, like hot water. And I was like, I couldn't get cold water unless it was like pre-refrigerated. I felt like a nightmare. Those like commercials like with milk where people are like eating a bunch of cookies. It's like they got milk, they eat a bunch of cookies and like, I must be in heaven. And all of a sudden they go to drink milk and the milk's empty. And it's like, I must not be in heaven. That's like one of my favorite commercials. But that's what I felt like when I was in Texas. I was like, there's no cold water anywhere in sight and it's so hot outside. So getting warm water down seems like a real challenge to me. Do you put a little bit of honey in it or is there some way to like make it to where it's not?
Yeah, well, I think it's something you do get acclimated to. You will sometimes put a half of a lemon in it, like a squeeze of a half of a lemon, and that also helps to boost your digestive juices. This can be really helpful for people who've never been breakfast eaters that are kind of like, my stomach just feels like it's totally shut down in the morning. There's no way I can eat. Well, doing things like this, like a glass of warm lemon water in the morning will actually cause your digestive juices to wake up and say, okay, it's time to start digesting food now. It's like priming the pump. But I think that, there is something to be said about a cold glass of water on a summer day. I definitely agree with you. But I think that we, as like a restaurant culture, right? You go to a restaurant, you get like big thing of iced water or iced tea or, those types of things. And it's just that level of cold being driven into the body that really shuts down our digestive fire. And so as much as you can, thinking about, keeping the digestive juices going, keeping, warmth in the gut is really important. And for some people, that means it needs to be like all the way to tea, like hot tea. And that's totally fine too. The idea of warm is just like a little too much in between there. So hot tea can definitely work as well.
It's great stuff, Frankie. Now, I want to remind everybody that this is what Frankie does for a living. Like, she really gives people insight and coaching around what should be going into your body, how to best take care of your body. Frankie, before I kind of move to the signature question of the show and even kind of ask if there's anything else you want to add, how do people get in contact with you? For people that are watching right now, that are going to listen to the podcast afterward, boy, to have someone in their corner, like, again, health becomes so critical, especially I think at this time of like COVID-19, we realize how fragile like human life really is and how quickly it can be altered and lost, right? To where we've got this kind of newfound opportunity to readjust our habits and to fortify ourselves against viruses, against even just our own bad habits, right? So tell us, how do people go about finding you, working with you, any details you want to share there that would be helpful to people that are like, man, this has been my wake-up call, this whole COVID-19. This is my time to really change my habits and have this be a turning point in my life. Have this be a time in my life when I'm going to be a different person. I'm going to take care of my body differently so that I could actually live in my body for, a longer period of time. What advice would you have to them as far as getting in contact with you?
Yeah, so my business is Radiate Wellness. So it's radiate-wellness.com, and you can go there and actually jump right on my schedule for a Q&A call. That's probably the fastest, easiest way to get to me and to get into a conversation with me. I do these free Q&A calls just to talk through, like, what are the symptoms that you're having? What are the things that you've done? What's worked? What hasn't? It can just, because I believe that functional nutrition requires a strong relationship. And so this is a way for me to really get to know people who are interested in the world of starting to take better care of themselves. Radiate Your Wellness on Instagram is a great place to kind of follow and to follow along with things that I put up as far as, health challenges and things that you could kind of play along with. I have a women's detox crash course coming out this Friday. That's you can register for there on my Instagram page as well. So I'm always trying, especially in this time, I'm trying to offer more things for us to connect, to be in groups, to be able to learn together. I have a 5-step guidebook as well that you can get off of my Instagram profile link. That is really some 5 main steps to move from overwhelm into action. Like, if you're one of these people out there who's just like been back burnering their symptoms and they know that this is a time that they need to dig in and try to start working on these things, you can, get into the 5-step guidebook as a way to just start to declutter and to see, okay, what are some things I can start doing right away? So those are some ways to get in touch with me and to reach out. There's also tons of information on my website about, functional testing. I do everything from hormonal testing, food intolerance testing, stool testing for gut pathogens, just to really get in there and see what are these things that might be hiding in the body.
So good. And I think, again, health is never a top priority until all of a sudden it is, right? And all of a sudden you have this wake up call that, oh my goodness, there's something wrong with my body. It's not working the way it's supposed to be. Like with you, where you had like 2 cancer diagnoses by the age of 27, and you realize, like, I'm a healthy person, but I've got to make some changes here. And I would hope that anybody that's listening here realizes, we've talked a lot about health and nutrition being something to boost performance, right? But also just to boost longevity of your life, right? And quality of life. We, again, live at a time where we have, this virus that's really, done some terrible things to the world in which we live. And those people who don't have health jeopardized, right, have been less at risk. And hopefully that's a wake up call. Like whenever possible, I want to put my body in a situation to where if there's stuff like that going around, I have the best chance to be fortified against it, right? As opposed to have a weak body that stuff like that could come along. And sometimes we don't always have a choice, right? Sometimes we have stuff that like we were just born with. And so that, of course, isn't meant to have anybody feel bad about that. But there are some things that we can choose, right? There's some things that we can do to be healthier. And I hope that this has maybe woken some people up. Again, my mission is to wake people up, to recognize the potential within them, and then to inspire and help them to go on to live in pursuit of that potential. That's what I'm all about. And so what you've done here, Frankie, is really woken us up to health and how to, and given us some tools to not only inspire us, but to really help us. I want to thank you for that. Tell us, what is your website again, the domain?
It's radiate-wellness.com. Okay. So a little hyphen there in between.
Love it. I love it. So the signature question of the show, Frank, and you're totally unprepared. I think you're prepared to receive this, but I did not give you a heads up, which this will be very exciting. So you are a big thinker, right? And that's what this is all about, is bringing in big thinkers that can help us, again, grow our business without sacrificing everything else. And you are that person who's done that for us today. What does somebody like you do to continue to be a big thinker, to continue to expand your own possibilities? What does that look like for you?
I love this question so much. I think that for me, it requires always being willing to get uncomfortable, right? Like, I mean, nutrition is what I love. It's what I do. I like eat, drink, and sleep it. And recently in my business, I've been doing a lot more development work. I have a new online program that just came out called the Pivot Project. And I think the development work keeps my brain growing. Like, it literally keeps me moving and learning into new realms all the time, and continuing to take what I'm thinking about and what I'm learning about and getting it out there to more people. So I think you have to find something that is that edge for you, that's like exciting enough to bring you in, but it's also going to be filled with a world of all new things to learn. And I think being a forever learner is just a part of thinking big, and really expanding our growth as a person and what we're able to provide to our communities and to, you know, the greater world. I think that those things we have to sometimes be uncomfortable and move past where our zone is to be able to challenge ourselves in that way.
So good. It's almost as if you had like a week to prepare for that question, Frankie. You nailed it. That was so good. So I'm going to have Frankie email to me all of the links that will be helpful to learn about your pivot project, to learn about your website, even kind of your Instagram handle, all those things we're going to put in the show notes. That if you're listening, you'll be able to find that at justinstoddart.com/podcast. You'll see Frankie's show highlighted there coming up here, maybe even by the end of the day. But for sure by tomorrow. So anyway, just know that there's going to be a lot of resources to help you, to direct you to Frankie, to really get the help that she's offering to all of us to be healthier and happier as a result of it. So I want to thank you so much, Frankie, for coming on the Think Bigger Real Estate Show today, for really helping us to think bigger about our health and how important it really is, and some really simple things that we can be doing right now to really make ourselves healthier. So thank you for that. I appreciate it very much. And I also want to do one final charge to everybody listening today. And there are 3 simple words. You hear me say it all the time, and they are go think bigger. Thank you so much, Frankie, for helping us do that today. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you, Justin.